My name is Morgan Sanders, and at 31, I thought I had figured out life pretty well. I had what appeared to be a successful marriage to David, a charming real estate agent who swept me off my feet 5 years ago. To everyone around us, we looked like the perfect couple. Him with his flashy car and designer suits, me with my quiet demeanor and modest teaching job at the local elementary school. What nobody knew, including David, was that beneath my unassuming exterior lay financial assets that would make his head spin. My late grandmother had left me a substantial inheritance, including offshore accounts and property investments that I'd kept completely private. I suppose I wanted to see if David loved me for who I was, not what I had. The first crack in our marriage appeared on a rainy Thursday evening in March. I came home early from school with a migraine, expecting to find our house empty since David usually worked late showing properties. Instead, I heard familiar laughter coming from our bedroom. David's deep chuckle mixed with a woman's giggle that definitely wasn't mine. My heart hammered as I crept up the stairs, each step feeling like lead. Through the crack in our bedroom door, I saw David tangled in our sheets with Rebecca Martinez, my younger sister who worked as a receptionist at his real estate office. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow, but something inside me remained eerily calm. I backed away silently, my mind already calculating my next moves. They had no idea what storm they had just unleashed. Over the following weeks, I became a master of pretense, acting like the devoted wife while secretly documenting everything. David grew bolder, staying out later with increasingly flimsy excuses about client meetings and office paperwork. Rebecca, meanwhile, began showing up at family gatherings with expensive jewelry and designer handbags that her receptionist salary couldn't possibly afford. During Sunday dinners at my parents' house, she flashed her new purchases while shooting me sympathetic looks, as if she pitied my simple lifestyle. My mother would praise Rebecca's success and subtly hint that I should be more ambitious like my sister. If only they knew that Rebecca's newfound wealth came from sleeping with my husband, funded by the joint account I contributed to from my teaching salary. The breaking point came in June when I discovered David had been taking money from our joint savings account, money I had contributed from my inheritance, disguised as teaching income, to fund elaborate dates with Rebecca. Bank statements revealed expensive restaurant charges, weekend hotel stays, and jewelry purchases that never made it home to me. When I confronted him about the missing funds, David had the audacity to gaslight me, claiming I must have miscalculated our expenses. He even suggested I was becoming paranoid and maybe needed to see a therapist about my trust issues. Rebecca, emboldened by her secret relationship, began openly questioning my financial contributions to family events, wondering aloud how someone on a teacher's salary could afford to help our parents with their mortgage payments. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was essentially questioning the source of her own newfound luxuries. By August, their affair had become an open secret among David's colleagues and some of our mutual friends, though they assumed I remained obliviously in the dark. At Rebecca's birthday party, I watched David slip away to take a phone call, returning 20 minutes later with lipstick on his collar that matched Rebecca's shade perfectly. My sister made a show of hugging him goodbye, letting her hands linger on his chest while maintaining eye contact with me. My parents praised David for being such a supportive brother-in-law, completely blind to what was happening under their noses. That night, David came home reeking of Rebecca's perfume and had the nerve to kiss me goodnight, whispering that he loved me. I smiled and returned the sentiment, knowing it would be one of the last lies I'd have to endure from him. September brought unexpected developments when David began hinting about wanting to upgrade our lifestyle and suggesting I look into higher-paying career options. He mentioned several times how my teaching job was holding us back from achieving our full potential as a couple. During one particularly galling conversation, he wondered aloud why we couldn't afford the kind of vacations his clients took, or why we drove such modest cars when other couples our age lived more luxuriously. Rebecca, who had been promoted to assistant manager at David's office, a position she was laughably unqualified for, began making similar comments about my limited ambitions. She suggested I might be happier in a different career, perhaps something that would allow David and me to reach our potential. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost amusing, especially since they had no idea about the seven-figure portfolio I maintained. October arrived with David becoming increasingly aggressive about our financial situation and future plans. He started pressuring me to refinance our house, claiming we could use the equity to invest in real estate opportunities through his company. When I hesitated, he accused me of not trusting his professional judgment and suggested my small-town mentality was preventing us from building real wealth. Rebecca joined these conversations whenever she visited, presenting herself as the voice of reason while subtly undermining my position. She'd share stories about successful couples she knew who had taken risks to improve their situations, all while wearing the diamond bracelet David had bought her with our joint funds. My parents, influenced by Rebecca's apparent success and David's smooth talking, began pressuring me to be more supportive of my husband's business ambitions. The perfect setup presented itself in November, when David announced he wanted to throw a joint birthday party for me and Rebecca, whose birthdays fell within the same week. He insisted on hosting it at our house, claiming it would be more intimate and meaningful than a restaurant celebration. Rebecca was thrilled with the idea, suggesting we make it a formal affair where David could network with potential clients while celebrating his favorite ladies. My parents were delighted by David's thoughtfulness and began planning an elaborate guest list that included extended family, David's colleagues, and several prominent members of our community. As I watched them plot this party, I realized they had unknowingly created the perfect stage for my revelation. They wanted a celebration where David could showcase his success and Rebecca could flaunt her newfound status. Instead, they would get a truth that would destroy both their facades. The party preparations consumed the entire month, with David sparing no expense on catering, decorations, and entertainment. He hired a jazz trio, ordered premium liquor, and even rented elegant table settings to impress his real estate contacts. Rebecca spent weeks shopping for the perfect dress, eventually settling on a stunning red number that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She insisted on giving a toast during the evening, claiming she wanted to honor both her sister and brother-in-law for their inspiring relationship. My parents arranged for professional photography to capture the special evening, and David's boss planned to attend with several major clients. As the guest list grew to over 50 people, I quietly made my own preparations, ensuring that certain documents would be readily accessible and that my attorney would be available by phone if needed. December 15th arrived with perfect weather and an atmosphere of anticipation that bordered on electric. Our house looked magnificent, transformed by professional decorations and filled with the sound of sophisticated conversation and clinking glasses. David moved through the crowd like a peacock, introducing Rebecca as his brilliant assistant manager while describing me as his supportive wife who keeps me grounded. Rebecca held court near the bar, regaling guests with stories about her rapid career advancement and hinting at exciting future opportunities. My parents beamed with pride as they watched their daughters being celebrated, completely unaware that they were witnessing the calm before a devastating storm. As the evening progressed and the alcohol flowed freely, David's confidence grew exponentially, and Rebecca became increasingly bold in her interactions with him, apparently forgetting that discretion had kept their secrets safe. The moment arrived when Rebecca clinked her glass and called for attention, preparing to deliver her planned toast that would supposedly honor our relationship while subtly promoting her own importance. David stood beside her, his arm casually draped around her waist, in a gesture that was just intimate enough to raise eyebrows among the more observant guests. As Rebecca began speaking about family loyalty and the importance of supporting those we love, I felt a calm settle over me that I hadn't experienced in months. She praised David's business acumen and suggested that some people were naturally meant for greater things, while others were content with simpler pleasures. When she raised her glass to toast David and Morgan's future success, implying that David was the driving force behind any prosperity, I knew the time had come to shatter their carefully constructed illusion. I stood slowly, my own glass in hand, and smiled warmly at the assembled crowd before beginning to speak in a voice that carried clearly through our suddenly quiet living room. "Thank you, Rebecca, for those touching words about family loyalty," I began, letting just enough irony creep into my tone to make a few guests shift uncomfortably. "Since we're talking about David's business success and our future prospects, I think this is the perfect time to share some exciting news about our actual financial situation." David's face began to drain of color as I continued. "You see, why everyone has been worried about my modest teacher's salary holding us back, I've been quietly managing a portfolio that includes offshore investments, commercial real estate holdings, and trust funds that total just over $12 million. The silence that followed was so complete that the jazz trio's music seemed suddenly thunderous. Rebecca's wine glass slipped from her numb fingers, shattering against our hardwood floor as the full implications of my words sank in. David's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, his face cycling through shades of white and red as he realized that his girlfriend and his wife were the same person, and that person was wealthy beyond his wildest dreams. My parents stared at me as if I had suddenly grown a second head, while David's colleagues began murmuring among themselves, clearly recalculating everything they thought they knew about our relationship dynamics. "The house we're standing in?" I continued conversationally. "I own it outright, purchased with inheritance money 3 years before David and I even met. The renovation funds, the furniture, even the car David drives to show properties, all paid for with my money, which he's been systematically stealing to fund his affair with my sister." The revelation hit the room like a bomb, with guests immediately turning to stare at David and Rebecca, who were now standing frozen like deer in headlights. Rebecca's face had gone completely white except for 2 bright spots of red on her cheeks, and she kept opening her mouth as if to speak before closing it again without making a sound. David finally found his voice, stammering denials and accusations, claiming I was having some kind of breakdown and making up stories for attention. But his protests fell flat when I calmly pulled out my phone and began reading bank statements aloud, detailing specific withdrawals that coincided perfectly with Rebecca's mysterious shopping sprees and David's unexplained absences. When I mentioned the hotel charges for their romantic getaways, several guests gasped audibly. And David's boss stepped backward with an expression of disgust crossing his features. My parents sat in stunned silence as I methodically dismantled the facade that David and Rebecca had constructed, revealing how they had manipulated family gatherings to make me appear financially dependent while secretly funding their betrayal with my own money. Rebecca's promotion at David's company suddenly made perfect sense to everyone present, and several of David's colleagues began exchanging meaningful looks as they remembered questionable decisions and late-night meetings that now had obvious explanations. When I finished my recitation of facts, I looked directly at Rebecca and said, "Since you've been so concerned about my limited ambitions and David's need for a more supportive partner, I'm sure you'll be thrilled to know that your relationship can now flourish without any interference from me or my apparently inadequate financial contributions." The room remained silent except for the sound of David's heavy breathing and Rebecca's barely contained sobs. The aftermath was swift and merciless, unfolding like dominoes falling in perfect sequence. David's boss approached him immediately after my revelation, informing him quietly but firmly that his employment would be terminated effective Monday morning, as the company couldn't afford to be associated with someone who had demonstrated such profound dishonesty and poor judgment. Rebecca's promotion was obviously compromised as well, and several colleagues who had previously admired her rapid advancement now looked at her with barely concealed contempt. My parents, mortified by their favoritism toward Rebecca and their pressure on me to be more financially ambitious, struggled to find words adequate to express their shock and regret. Within an hour, most of the guests had made their excuses and departed, leaving David and Rebecca to face the full weight of their exposure in an increasingly empty house that they now realized belonged entirely to me. David's attempts to salvage the situation grew increasingly desperate as the reality of his circumstances became clear. He followed me into the kitchen, alternating between tearful apologies and angry accusations, demanding to know why I had trapped him in a marriage built on lies and deception. When I pointed out that he was the one who had been lying and deceiving, he shifted tactics, trying to convince me that his affair was a symptom of feeling inadequate next to my hidden wealth, rather than a betrayal of our marriage vows. Rebecca, meanwhile, had locked herself in our guest bathroom, presumably to avoid the stares and whispered comments from the few remaining guests. My father attempted to apologize for his family's treatment of me, while my mother sat in stunned silence, clearly trying to process how thoroughly she had misjudged both her daughters. Situations. The legal proceedings that followed were surprisingly straightforward, thanks to the prenuptial agreement David had insisted upon when we married, an agreement that protected my assets but left him with virtually nothing, since all our joint property had been purchased with my money. Rebecca's employment at David's former company lasted exactly 3 more days before she was quietly let go. Ostensibly for budget reasons, but obviously because her relationship with David had created an untenable workplace situation. My parents spent weeks apologizing and trying to rebuild our relationship, though the damage to family dynamics was irreversible. David moved out within a month, taking only his personal belongings and leaving behind the life of luxury he had unknowingly been living at my expense. The divorce was finalized 6 months later, with David receiving no alimony and no property settlements, exactly as our prenuptial agreement stipulated. Looking back now, 18 months after that revelatory birthday party, I can honestly say that discovering David's betrayal was the best thing that ever happened to me. Living authentically, without hiding my financial independence or pretending to be someone I'm not, has been incredibly liberating. I've since started a foundation that provides educational resources to underprivileged children, using my wealth to make a meaningful difference rather than maintaining a facade of financial dependence. David and Rebecca's relationship collapsed within 3 months of their exposure, apparently unable to survive without the excitement of secrecy and the funding from my accounts. My parents and I have slowly rebuilt our relationship, though they remain appropriately humble about their previous assumptions regarding my capabilities and ambitions. The experience taught me that sometimes the greatest revenge is simply allowing people to face the natural consequences of their choices, while revealing the truth they tried so hard to hide.